Hello, I'm Dr. Candace Roberts, the Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence at St. Leo University. And welcome to this brief discussion about instructor presence, a variable that can have a huge impact on student and instructor success. Of course, there are many factors that impact student success, things such as the design of a course, the cognitive engagement that we're able to create or facilitate, and the kinds of teaching strategies that we use in a course, such as active learning strategies. But instructor presence is often an overlooked and underestimated variable in student success. So just what is instructor present or teaching presence? We all are familiar with the term presence. We know that to be present is to be physically present, but it also means to be cognitively present, socially present, emotionally present. To be fully present in the moment means you're focused on whatever it is you're engaged in. Sometimes knowing what presence is has a lot to do with knowing what it's not. We've all had that feeling of being with someone who wasn't fully present. It might be a spouse or a partner or a teenage child or a colleague, where when you're in a conversation, it seems more one-sided, or the other person isn't really hearing what it is you're saying. We see it a lot in restaurants where people begin to disengage with each other and they're on their cell phones. So this disengagement comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of the relationship. It comes at a cost of the interaction, of the richness of the hearing about and learning from each other. And so instructor presence is that phenomenon when students know there's a human being in this course, when students feel heard, when the instructor is listening and interacting with the students. And this is where the joy of teaching occurs. This is where the most productive teaching and learning happens, when there is that full presence of the instructor. I think this quote speaks volumes about the value of being fully present. You'd be a better leader if you were present when you showed up. How many of us have had that experience with a boss or a supervisor who they just didn't hear the ideas you were trying to share, or the problem you were trying to solve, or they just didn't sense what you were going through as an employee because they weren't fully present? And this really carries over to all other human relationships. You'd be a better friend if you were present when you showed up. You'd be a better spouse. You'd be a better parent. You'd be a better colleague if you were present when you showed up. And in this case, most importantly, you'd be a better instructor if you are fully present when you show up. I had a supervisor once who, anytime I was engaged in a conversation with her, I often felt that she was thinking about the next thing she was going to say and therefore didn't even hear what I was saying. And I found it, I would walk away from the conversation going, I don't think she heard what I said. And I think this quote really captures that. Most people are never fully present in the now because unconsciously we believe that the next moment must be more important than this one. But then you miss your whole life, which is never not now. So, it sort of makes us mindful of, or I'm in this course, I've built this course, or I'm teaching this course, and we're always thinking about the next thing. But are we fully in the moment with our students, with our content, each time we meet? So let's talk a little bit more about exactly what instructor presence is and why it's important. The term instructor or teaching presence actually came from the work of Garrison, Anderson, and Archer back in 2001 with their framework for the community of inquiry, what they called the community of inquiry framework. How do you create a community of inquiry, a community of people learning? And they identified three critical factors or presences in that community. The first was teaching presence or instructor presence. The second was cognitive presence. How do you create or facilitate that? How do you engage students cognitively and get them to bring their whole brains, their whole thinking selves to the table? And social presence. How do you capitalize on that need for the human brain to interact with other human brains and ideas? And how do you create or cultivate a social presence? And then years later, added to that was the concept of emotional presence. How do we account for the affective nature of learning and the emotions that students feel, whether fear or exhilaration or excitement or curiosity or whatever? And how do we capitalize on that presence and recognize that presence in our teaching? But this particular presentation, of course, is focused on instructor presence, one of, if not perhaps the most important factor in our courses. So instructor presence is the result of intentional behaviors that an instructor exhibits to communicate to his or her students that she or he is a human who is present throughout the course. Now, keep in mind that's intentional behaviors that an instructor demonstrates. This presence communicates to students that the role of the instructor is not only as a content expert and an evaluator. Well, those are two important roles of a professor. Being a content expert and an evaluator is not all there is to good teaching. Instructor presence also communicates that the instructor is a facilitator, is there to support student learning, is a communicator, is there to communicate to and with and hear from students, that instructor is a guide, an encourager, and a mentor. That's much more than just an evaluator and a content expert. Positive instructor presence can increase student engagement. It supports student mastery of content. It builds a positive, effective learning community, and it increases student satisfaction in their learning experiences and overall in the course. So why else is instructor presence so important? Well, to begin with, instructor presence helps avoid or avert that disconnection or that isolation that students often feel, especially in online classes, but it can also be in on-ground or hybrid classes. And we know when students seem disconnected, they're not getting the content, they're not as motivated, they're not engaged, they're asking more questions when it's the night before something is due. So again, without that presence, that mutual feeling of being present in the course, students begin to feel isolated or disconnected. When students feel they or the instructor are disconnected, they negatively report that they feel like they are teaching themselves. When students sense that the instructor is present, they're less likely to approach the course as some familiar drill or system to be gamed. Instructor presence positively impacts student success. We know this from many studies, in particular this one here that I have cited from Jaggers and Zhu, but we know that instructor presence positively impacts students' success. And student sense of engagement with the instructor ultimately positively impacts student course evaluations because students feel more satisfied with their learning experiences, feel more engaged with the course and the instructor. So just how do we go about creating this instructor presence? There are a number of strategies, variables, elements that we can attend to create our own individual instructor presences. Certainly communication is critical. Students feeling like they're heard, you're responding, you're communicating out information that is helpful to them. The instructional strategies that you select that help to engage them in your course and help them to know that you are there helping them along the way. Obviously your instructional delivery and the feedback that you provide. Do they feel like that feedback is helping them to grow? Is it clear to them why they were evaluated the way they were? And is that feedback timely? Is there a sense that I've turned something in and it's eons before I get feedback on it? I hardly remember the assignment, and you wonder if anybody's out there getting the assignment. So feedback is also very important. And all of these things have to do with a sense of connection. All of these things are ways that you connect with your students. One tool that instructors have at their disposal that can make a huge difference on a sense of instructor presence for students is the use of video. It's particularly useful in fully asynchronous online courses and in hybrid courses where an instructor might not have as much or any face-to-face time with students. Video provides the opportunity for instructors to show the passion they have for not only their content but also their students learning the content. The voice intonations and inflections, the physical presence in the video, all of that helps students to connect to the instructor and helps students to get to know the instructor and helps students not to feel that disconnection, that there's not really somebody out there that cares about my success in this course or that's fully present in the course. And they can much more easily connect with the instructor. According to Edgecombe and his colleagues, the use of video is positively correlated with student success and student engagement. Students report that live video chats or video lectures using web conferencing tools such as Zoom or Adobe Connect help students to engage more deeply in the course. In 2016, Jim Lang wrote a book called Small Teaching. And the premise of his book is that we can make small changes, small instructional decisions that have a huge impact. That in order to improve or make the most of our teaching, we don't have to think big and change everything. We just need to make intentional decisions each week, each semester that impact student success. And I love this quote from his book: people give their attention to those who pay attention to them. And we know this is true in our personal lives, but it's so very true in our courses. People pay attention when we connect and pay attention to them. And there are some very simple, concrete ways that we can do that. By greeting them when they arrive into the class, whether that's into a Zoom class or a physical on-ground class. When they arrive, call them by name and say, "Welcome. I'm glad you're here. How are you doing?" I was in a webinar yesterday, and the facilitator of the webinar greeted every person. Now, it was a small group. You might not be able to do that with 40 people, but every person who entered the webinar, when they entered, she addressed them by name and said, "Welcome, we're glad you're here today." And it created such a hospitable environment and a warm environment where everyone felt like, I'm here, I'm present, and they recognize my presence. Other ways to pay attention to students: ask them questions. Hey, how are you? How was your week? Anybody struggle with any of the reading, or anybody have questions about where we are right now? Asking them things that matter, both content-wise and sometimes it helps to connect on a personal level. I know someone who always asks their students for roses or thorns. Anybody have any roses this week or thorns this week? And it kind of helps them to feel human and recognized in the course. When students respond to your questions, listen to their answers, and not just politely, quietly listening, but respond to those answers. Expand on them, confirm them, ask other students what they think about them. But when they respond, make sure that they know they've been heard. Address something that they've posted in in an online discussion board. I noticed Zinnia this week commented on this, and I thought it was spot on because it connected to what's happening in the news, or whatever. But you're actually commenting on and using your students' insight to further the content of the course. And then again, applying the content of the course to their personal lives says to them, I care whether you get this and whether this matters to you. So looking for ways to pay attention to our students so they pay attention to our content. So some other strategies to foster instructor presence include things like establishing a positive instructor-student relationship that really can't be overestimated. It's the whole thing about students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and they are much more likely to engage deeply in learning when they feel like they're in a safe environment where they're valued and where this instructor cares about them and their learning. So that relationship can be really important as a foundational principle of the learning environment. One way to do that is introduce yourself as a human being. So yes, you are a scholar. Yes, you are an expert in your field, and they expect that. But what they really want to know is how are you going to treat them, and who are you as a human being? And so it's important to take time to have introductions and to be authentic about who you are, not only as a scholar but as a person, and that you care about their learning, and and a lot of times, I frequently do a get acquainted activity or even a slide where I'll provide a slide introducing myself, and I might include pictures of my family or places I like to go or books I like to read or music I like to listen to. Sometimes I'll have my students do a slide of themselves. I just call it an About Me slide. They don't have to use pictures if they're uncomfortable with that. They can just use symbols or images of things that represent them. But it really goes a long way in establishing a community of learners and them realizing that you're a human being too, and it enables them to connect with you better. It's also important to give students opportunities to share and discuss ideas together, that they they feel valued and that they have something to contribute to the environment. Creating those interactive moments in class are really important, and you being a part of those, being present in those. Communicating regularly is really important. It's, particularly in an online course, students shouldn't feel like it's on automatic pilot and that, you just pop in once in a while. It's important to be intentional and to think about what is it like to be a student in my class? What do students need to know? Are you using regular announcements to kind of update them on how things are going? And, it may be some insights on, what you noticed from last week or what's coming up this week and what they want to make sure they're keeping up with. Where to find certain assignments or certain resources in the course shell. Are you taking the time to explain assignments? Now this is a really big thing for synchronous sessions. It's a phenomenal opportunity to really flesh out an assignment, explain it. They might not know where to get resources for that assignment, or exactly, what are the pitfalls or the problems that students in the past have had with that assignment, or what are the things they should be aware of, or how far in advance should they plan, and that sort of thing. So, taking that opportunity to not only explain the assignments in the Zoom synchronous session, but also answering questions. That's a huge thing. And I often go to the announcements after I've had that Zoom synchronous session and say, be sure that you watch the video or the recording. If you weren't in class, be sure you watch the recording because there's a lot of important information about the assignment for this upcoming week. Email. As a professor, we know that emails can be just consuming. We get so many a day. But your course emails are really important to respond to in a timely manner. And you can let them know what a timely manner is. Just because they sent an email at 11 p.m. doesn't mean you should be answering it at 12 a.m. or 11:30 p.m. Let them know what's a reasonable time frame, that 24 hours or 36 hours is an appropriate time frame, or if you get something past 9 p.m. you're not answering it. Whatever your parameters are, just be sure that you give those to students in advance so they know what to expect and they're not frustrated because they're wondering when they're ever going to hear from you. So that email response is important to students, but it's also important for them to have realistic expectations about what you can and will be able to do. Providing timely feedback is another important quality of instructor presence, or another important demonstration or manifestation of instructor presence. Students are anxious to know how they're doing, and if they turn in an assignment but they don't get feedback for 3 weeks, not only are they anxious, but they don't have important feedback that's going to direct them in what they're doing next. So they should be able to get that feedback in time to apply it to the next assignment, to know whether they're on target or not. So you're speaking to them through feedback. You're communicating with them through feedback is really important in both their success and their perception of you being present in the course and for their success. So be sure that you're making time to provide feedback, meaningful feedback, so that they are getting it when they need it and so they can apply it to their learning. And then lastly, use technology to connect students and to collaborate with them and with each other. So things like Flipgrid, a video response tool, is a really dynamic way to get students connecting to each other and to you. Padlet is a great way. It's like a post-it note platform where students can go in and post their observations or insights. Collaborative documents, whether you're using Google Documents or OneDrive or some other tool for students to be able to take collaborative notes or to be able to work on projects together, to be able to use those in your Zoom sessions. You can have them working in small groups on a collaborative document. So there are myriad tools that professors can use in their online courses and in their Zoom synchronous sessions that really help to foster collaboration and get students interacting. The Zoom Interactive Whiteboard is another one. In fact, Zoom's done an update on those, and they're really robust and phenomenal. You can actually create a whiteboard in Zoom prior to the Zoom session so that it is also accessible to students after the Zoom session. So it's not just gone with the session, and that could be really invaluable also. Any of these tools that you're interested in using, you can always connect up with the CTLE. We are happy to help you practice with them, try them out before you use them with your students. We are happy to demonstrate them for you. So if you have any questions about different tech tools that you could use to establish instructor presence and to create a community of learners, we are happy to help you with that. So if you're using Zoom synchronous sessions, what are some of the things that you can do that can help create that instructor presence during those synchronous sessions? What are some specific strategies? We've mentioned before the importance of building relationships, and the beginning of class is a great time to do that. I like to say, if your camera is off, please, please consider putting it on, using a background. But if not, be ready at the chat anytime that I ask a question or we're engaged in dialogue, because I'm going to ask you frequently to give your thoughts and opinions, and everyone should be engaged either via video and audio discussion or via the chat. So I want my students to know I expect their engagement in my course, and I will be engaging with them. Things you might ask at the beginning of class, just to, as I mentioned before, kind of connect with them on a human level. What's filling your bucket today or emptying it? What's inspiring your life? I mentioned before, what roses or thorns have you experienced this week? Or what made you smile today? It can be very brief and lighthearted, but it really does help students come fully to your class because they are fully present and they recognize that you are fully present because you're connecting with them. In your interactions with students during those Zoom sessions, you can do things like, you may be lecturing or, discussing a topic, give me a thumbs up when you're ready for the next step. Let me know if you've kind of got this. Or maybe they've been working in collaborative groups or you've given them a moment to respond to something in a chat or on a collaborative document and you want to make sure everybody's ready to move on. So instead of you just setting the time and moving on, you're actually asking them, give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Or you can say, give me a green check, because there are a number of tools and there will be other presentations for you about using Zoom specific tools that can help you connect with your students. So I won't go into great detail about those, but you can use any of these tools to gauge where students are in your class. The raising of the hand tool, raise your hand if you have a question or raise your hand when you're ready to share. And then to remind them, please come off mute to share your response. I really want to hear what you have. I usually will have my students write something out if it's something complex or something I want them to think about, a prompt or something that requires more than just a quick response, and then I will ask them to share that out. So they have something to work from. It's not just an impromptu. And that's really important in terms of differentiating instruction for students who need a little bit more time to think about the topic or the question or the prompt that you have just provided. So these are all ways, specific strategies in Zoom for it not to just be a recorded lecture where students just passively sit and receive, but there is this sense of interaction between the instructor and the students. Another quote from Jim Lang's book, Small Teaching, is, we should stop thinking so much about trying to eliminate distraction, and instead, you want to think about how to support and sustain attention. So how do we support and sustain that attention? And engagement on in terms of presence, both student and instructor presence, is really important in this. A lot of professors bemoan, my students aren't engaged, they never turn their cameras on, or they're in class, but they're not, really connecting, they're not answering questions, they're not engaging in dialogue. And, and Lang is saying, stop worrying about, the negatives about them, trying to eliminate things that are distracting them, their cell phones or computers or whatever, but instead give them a reason to be present. And, I'm going to use an analogy of, we've all been to those gatherings or parties that maybe someone has hosted at their house. And you have the host that's so busy, making sure that everything's taken care of and the food is all ready and the drinks are all ready and they're, flitting around and they just seem very, very busy. And you may never have even had a chance to connect with that person during the gathering, or maybe it was a hello, glad you're here, and now you're off on your own, and maybe it's even a gathering you don't know too many other people, and so it's not all that comfortable to be present there, and you're kind of waiting your time and looking forward to, going ahead and getting off and on your way. Conversely, there's the host that they're so happy that you're there. They ask you how you are. They want to know what's been going on. They take the time to connect with you, and they connect you to other people at the gathering. They want you to know they're a friend who is also interested in gardening or also went to that concert, or they make connections, and you begin to feel human and recognized, and it's a different sense of being present. It's a different sense of wanting to engage. You have this attention that you're paying to the party and that is being paid to you. And so your question is, how do you create that sense in your class? How do you, sustain, how do you support and sustain your student attention in your class by making those connections and being fully present? So as we begin to, close this concept of instructor presence, I like this old quote from Ben Franklin. Obviously, it's old, and we've seen this in a number of, communicated in a number of different ways. But he said, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, but involve me and I learn." And it's that whole notion of involvement. It's not passive. I'm not just being taught. I'm actually being involved. And that's what instructor presence does. It says, I recognize you, I see you, I am fully in, I am fully present, and together we're going on this journey. And that's where the joy of teaching and learning happens, is with that human connection and full presence of all of the participants. And the references are here. If you do have any questions or want to further pursue this concept of instructor presence, our teaching and learning specialists here at the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence are happy to connect up with you, to explore it further with you, or provide you additional ideas and examples.